I was standing at gate 14, my coat over one arm, the inherited veil clutched in my other hand, when the message came. 5 short words. Cold. Final. It's just her family. No greeting, no apology, not even mom. Just that, as if I were a forgotten errand crossed off a list. The sound of the terminal around me went silent. A woman nearby laughed into her phone, her suitcase swinging against her calf. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve, asking for candy. The world kept turning, but I didn't. I stared at the screen, willing it to change, willing it to be a mistake. But the little dot that meant he was typing never came back. I didn't cry. I wanted to. My chest felt full of water and glass, something that sloshed and pricked with every breath. But I didn't cry. Instead, I sat down slowly on the metal bench and smoothed my skirt, as if I had somewhere to go, as if dignity hadn't just packed its bags and flown off without me. I had paid for my own ticket. No one had asked me to, of course not. I had volunteered, happy to be included, happy to come. I bought a new dress, not expensive but proper. Midnight blue with pearl buttons. I packed the veil my mother had worn in 1947 and I in 1972, hoping his bride would find it charming. I'd had it cleaned, folded it in tissue paper, tied it with a ribbon. There were the gifts, too, a check in an envelope and a locket engraved with her initials. Now it all sat beside me in a floral suitcase with a worn handle, a museum piece of wasted effort. He knew I was coming. Knew I had booked the flight, the hotel. Knew I was bringing the veil. He just waited until I had arrived, until I had landed, until I was standing in the very place I had come for. And then he erased me with a text message. I opened the message again, reread it, as if the tone might be hidden somewhere in the empty space between the letters. It wasn't. It was what it was. I pulled my coat on and stood up, holding myself straight as I felt. Maybe someone was watching. Maybe the universe was. And I wouldn't let it see me crumble. The taxi line was short. The driver, a young man with tattoos peeking from under his sleeves, barely looked up as I gave him the name of a hotel I'd picked because it looked clean and quiet. He asked if I was in town for the wedding. I forced a smile. Not anymore, I said. The ride was silent after that. The city slid by, with its palm trees and perfect skies.
Nothing like Ohio. To bricht vor Adeleixis, too beautiful to fill the emptiness I felt inside.
At the hotel, I checked in, tipped the bellhop though I normally never did, and stood motionless in the room for a long time. The window overlooked a parking lot and a strip mall with a CVS and a frozen yogurt shop. Not the view I'd imagined when I booked it. I unpacked the veil first, laying it carefully on the bed like something fragile and sleeping. Then the locket, then the card. I lined them up in a row like evidence in a case no one would prosecute. And then I sat in the armchair by the window and stared. He wasn't always like this. That's the thing. He cried when I dropped him off at kindergarten. He drew me pictures of houses with me in them and hearts over the roof. He sat beside me while I peeled apples for pie, asking how the sun worked. I thought, I don't know what I thought. That weddings were for family. That mothers were important. That being the one who stayed up with him when he had the measles still meant something, even now. That maybe on this day, he would want me standing quietly and lovingly behind him. Instead, he deleted me. And still, I didn't cry. I sat, still, until the light faded and the neon signs across the street flickered on. Then I stood up, walked to the desk, took out the notepad and pen beside the phone, and started to write a list. It had 2 items.
Cancel the transfer to Tyler.
Call Mrs. Reed. Mrs. Reed is my lawyer. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but suddenly I knew exactly what I needed to say. Because if I no longer had a seat at his table, I would no longer be funding the feast. I folded the veil back into its box one last time. Then I put the locket inside and sealed the envelope, not with tears, but with resolve. The hotel room smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and something older, maybe old carpets or stale air. I stood at the small window, my hand on the curtain pull, and watched the sky turn from gold to gray. My suitcase sat unopened at the foot of the bed. Not because I'd forgotten it, but because I wasn't ready to admit I was here, alone and without purpose. I had come for my son's wedding. I had brought the veil. I had brought the gift. I had packed everything carefully. Extra stockings, my pill organizer, even a nail file in a Ziploc bag so it wouldn't raise a flag at security. That kind of planning doesn't just evaporate because someone uninvites you by text. I finally opened the suitcase. I laid things out as if I were still going somewhere. Shoes on the floor, dress on a hanger, toiletries in the bathroom. And then I reached for the small wooden box wrapped in a handkerchief, tucked inside the clothes. The veil. It had belonged to my mother, Ruth. Handmade lace, as delicate as a breath. She wore it at her wedding, and I wore it at mine. I'd had it cleaned and restored, paid more for the conservation service than I'd paid for my own wedding dress. I had imagined presenting it to my daughter-in-law on the morning of her wedding, telling her how it came from women who stayed, who worked, who loved stubbornly. I had imagined her smile. Now I ran my fingers over the fine netting. Too fine for this world, I thought. Too fine for people who send 5-word texts to erase a mother. I put it back in the box. I didn't sleep that night, not deeply. The bed was too hard, the sheets too white.
I lay on my side, watching shadows dance on the ceiling.
The television in the corner was a silent, dark screen. I kept waiting for another message, an addition, an explanation. But my phone remained quiet on the nightstand, its screen dark. In the morning, I had decided. I called the front desk and asked for the number of a local law office. The man on the phone gave me 3, his voice cheerful in the way hotel staff are trained to be. I thanked him and dialed the second number on the list, only because it sounded like the kind of firm that didn't hang up on old women. They could see me that afternoon. I confirmed the time, dressed carefully, and packed the veil back in the box one last time. I left it on the desk with a note. Please do not disturb. I will be back. But I didn't take the gift envelope with me. That went into my purse. I wasn't done deciding what to do with it. The law office was in a beige building next to a dry cleaner. It didn't look like much. But the woman who met me in the waiting room had silver hair and the kind of direct gaze I trusted. Mrs. Foster, she said.
I'm Anne.
I need to update my will, I said, without preamble, and establish a trust. And nodded, not asking why. She led me into her office and poured me a glass of water. I already liked her. I want to remove my son, Tyler Foster, as a beneficiary, I said. Entirely. And I want everything to go to my granddaughter. She raised one eyebrow slightly. May I ask why? Because she's the only one who has never lied to me, I said. And because I will not leave my life's work to a man who deletes his mother like a spam email. And didn't react with surprise or pity. She just made notes. Does your granddaughter have a guardian? She's a freshman in college. Brilliant. Then it's simple, she said. We'll set up a will and a living trust. Do you have any specific conditions? Yes, I said. She can't touch a penny of it until she's 25. Unless it's for education, healthcare, or the purchase of her first home. Very sensible. She's kind, smart, but she's young. I want to help her, not ruin her. And looked at me and smiled. You're not ruining anyone, Mrs. Foster. You're restoring a balance. It took 2 hours. When I left, I had a folder of copies and a business card. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt nothing, just quiet, as if I'd finally stopped waiting for someone else to do the right thing. Back at the hotel, the sun was beginning to set again. Another perfect California sky. I sat in the same armchair by the window, but something was different. The veil was still on the desk. I didn't move it. Instead, I picked up my phone and texted my granddaughter, Sydney. Sweetheart, are you free for lunch tomorrow? She answered in under 2 minutes. Of course, Grandma.
Wer schult I mit you?
And just like that, I wasn't uninvited from everything. Just from a wedding. Sydney had her father's eyes. That was always the first thing people noticed. Wide-set, dark, thoughtful. But where his had become guarded with age, hers were open, searching, the kind of eyes that waited for answers instead of shutting down the questions. She met me at a small cafe 3 blocks from the hotel, wearing jeans and a white blouse, her hair pulled back in a braid just like she had when she was 10. She hugged me the second she saw me. "You look beautiful," she said. I almost said, "Don't lie," but I stopped myself. Let her say it. Let her mean it. I had spent too many years batting away kindness as if it had an expiration date. We ordered sandwiches and iced tea. And then she leaned forward and asked, her voice low, "Grandma, what happened?" I took a long sip of tea. "Your father decided I'm not invited. That's all." Her brows drew together. "But he said you weren't feeling well, that you might not be able to fly."
He smiled a sad smile.
"Did he? That's generous of him." She looked down, fiddling with her straw wrapper. "He didn't really say much, just that the wedding was going to be small, that it was mostly her family." "Well, that part is true," I said. "It was all her family by design." She looked up, her face tight with something between concern and shame. "He shouldn't have done that." "No," I said quietly. "He shouldn't have." I didn't tell her how it felt at the airport, how my knees went a little weak reading that text. I didn't describe the silence of the room, the weight of the heirloom veil still folded in its box. Some things were not meant to be carried by grandchildren. "Can I ask you something?" Sydney said. "What happened between you two? Between you and Dad?" I leaned back. The question sank deep. What happened, as if it were one thing, a single moment, a clean break. But it wasn't. It was 1,000 small things over years, like standing in the ocean and slowly realizing the tide is pulling you out. "He changed," I said finally. "College changed him. Or maybe life did. I don't blame him for growing up. I blame him for turning his back." Sydney didn't speak. She just listened. That alone meant more than she could know. "When your grandfather died," I said, "Tyler came home for the funeral. He held my hand the whole time, cried more than I did. He stayed for 3 days, and we cooked and laughed and remembered. And then he left, and with every visit after that, something in him closed up a little more." I picked up my sandwich but didn't take a bite. "He got married quickly, moved out west, got a job, a house, a new circle of friends. He stopped returning calls, started sending gift cards for Christmas instead of coming home. And when I offered help, he took it, but always with a kind of silence, as if he were doing me a favor by accepting it." Sydney was still. "Did he ever say why?"
No.
"But I knew." "Knew what?"
He hesitated.
"That I embarrassed him." Her hand froze around her glass. "I was a public school teacher. Not glamorous, not polished. I wore cardigans with loose buttons and brought jello salads to potlucks. His wife's family, well, they come from money.
T-speak A13V, dress A13V. I never fit.
But that's no excuse." I shrugged. "People don't need excuses to leave you. Just convenience." Sydney looked like she was going to cry but didn't. She had my bones. I could see it in her jaw. "I want you to know something," I said. "I'm not telling you this so you'll pick a side. I'm telling you because no one else will, because it's the truth, and because I want you to understand that what your father did to me has nothing to do with who you are or who you will become." She nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope I had meant for her father and his bride. Inside was the locket, not the check, which had already been rerouted. "I brought this for the wedding," I said. "But I think I brought it for you." She opened it carefully. The locket was small and gold, engraved with delicate initials. SF and long ago, LF Sydney Forster and before that, Louise Forster, my mother-in-law. Inside, a photo of Sydney at 5, and one of me at the same age. She blinked fast. "I don't know what to say." "Just say you'll keep it," I said.
"I'll keep it."
The check would go to the trust. The veil would go back in the closet. But this moment, this was enough. I had thought I'd lost a son, but I'd found a truth and a granddaughter who saw me. And that was something to build on. My husband died on a Wednesday. It was early spring, one of those bright mornings when the world seems too alive for grief. The daffodils were just starting to push through the soil by our front porch. I remember because I'd noticed them that same morning, bent down to touch one, and thought how stubborn they were, how they always came back, no matter how hard the frost had been. He died quietly. No drama, no long illness, just a breath that didn't return. George Foster wasn't a remarkable man, if you looked at him through the world's lens. He sold insurance, drove an old Ford Taurus, made his coffee too thin. But he loved me with a consistency that outlasted every disappointment life threw at us. When my mother died, he held my hand for 6 hours. When I lost the baby before Tyler, he came home from work and just lay down next to me until I fell asleep. We were married for 34 years. Not all of them easy, not all of them kind, but we always chose each other again, even in the silences. After the funeral, Tyler stayed for 3 days. He helped clear out the garage, sorted old papers, took 2 boxes of his father's things back with him to the airport. On the last morning, he hugged me for a long time, his chin on my shoulder. "You'll be okay, right?" he asked. I said yes, and he believed me. He left me with the house, the Ford, and a bank account that could stretch if I was careful. He also left me with silence. A long silence. At first, I didn't feel it. I filled the days with school. I was still teaching 3rd grade then, which meant juice boxes and shoelaces and sticky hands. The noise helped. Kids don't leave much room for thinking. But the evenings would come, and they were quieter than I had ever known. No voice from the other room asking where the good batteries were. No shuffle of slippers on the kitchen floor. Just the creak of the house and my own breath. The first year, Tyler called every Sunday, 5 o'clock on the dot. We talked about the weather, my health, what he was reading. Then it became every other Sunday. Then once a month. Then only when he needed something. There were excuses, of course. Work, travel, the baby. His wife didn't like phone calls. She liked structure, he said. She liked space. I gave him enough space to lose a continent between us. He never said it directly, but I felt it in the way he would hesitate before introducing me to new people. "This is my mother." Followed by a pause, a shift in tone. I wasn't polished enough. My hands were worn, my laugh too loud. I started sending gift cards for Christmas, just to match the tone. I thought it might make things easier. He never complained, but the cards never came with phone calls. People talk about the loneliness of widowhood as if it's something that happens all at once, like a blow to the chest. But for me, it came on gradually. After the casseroles stopped, after the neighbors stopped dropping by, after Tyler stopped saying, "I love you" at the end of our calls, it settled like dust. I never remarried. Never wanted to. George was the kind of man you only get once. Not showy, but present. He used to say, "Some men try to be heroes. I'm content to just come home." And he always did, until he didn't. There were nights, especially in that 2nd year, when I would wake up and talk to him anyway, just quiet words into the dark. Telling him what Tyler had said, what Sydney had drawn, how the furnace was making a new noise. I knew it was silly, but it helped. I think he would have been angry. Not at Tyler directly, but at how easily a son can forget who taught him to tie his shoes, who wiped up his vomit at midnight, who ran behind his bike cheering the first time the training wheels came off. George would have said, "Mary, don't you let him treat you like that." I used to answer out loud, "It's just how he is now." But now, I don't know. Now, sitting in this hotel room, the veil packed away, the will rewritten, and Sydney drinking iced tea with her knees tucked under her like a girl half her age, I wonder if George was right. Maybe I let it go on too long. Maybe I excused too much. But not anymore. There's a drawer in my kitchen at home that sticks on the left side. You have to give it a little tug, then it slides open all at once with a clatter. That drawer holds everything I never thought I'd need to look at again. Receipts, bank letters, photocopies, old warranties, and one folder labeled Tyler. I started it when he got married. At first, it was just for organization. I didn't want to forget what I'd given or promised, in case he ever asked. But over time, it became something else. A record, perhaps. A silent ledger of what it cost to stay in someone's life when love wasn't enough. The first sheet is from 2003.
A check for $15,000.
A down payment on their first apartment. He said it was temporary, just until they got on their feet. They moved into a condo a year later that his in-laws co-signed. No one mentioned my share. Next, a credit card payoff.
$8,000.
He'd lost his job, said the bills were piling up. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, reading his email twice before calling the bank. I told him not to worry. Mothers don't let their children sink, not when they can help it.
Ten käm se Baby, Sydney, mij bricht leid.
I offered to start a college savings account when she was born. He said it was too early, that they'd get something set up on their own. They never did. Instead, the folder holds receipts for diapers, a stroller, a hospital bill that somehow wasn't covered. I sent money for each, no questions asked. In 2011, a torn knee ligament. He didn't have enough sick days, he said, and the insurance deductible was high.
$2,500.
I wired it the same day. In 2015, their car broke down. Not the nice one his wife drove, but the older one for errands. I covered the repairs.
$1,500.
A year later, the roof leaked. He called in the middle of the night, his voice low, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. Mom, I hate to ask, but... He didn't hate it. I transferred $10,000 that morning. All told, the folder holds records of over $50,000 across 20 years. Not counting gifts. Not counting flights for visits. Not counting the groceries I stocked in their kitchen when they were short that month. Not counting the coat I bought Sydney every winter until she was 17. Not counting the new laptop I sent when he said hers broke and they couldn't afford it right then. Not counting. It's not about the money. It never was. If he had said thank you, if he had looked me in the eye, if he had called just to talk, it would have balanced out. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being help and became expected. A silent tax on motherhood. I didn't notice the change at first. The first 5 years, every dollar felt like a hug from a distance. But eventually, the calls only came when something was needed, and the warmth dried up. The gifts went unmentioned, the deposits unacknowledged. Last year, on his birthday, I sent him a check, just a gesture. He cashed it the next day. He didn't call. He never did. The last sheet in the folder is from 4 months ago. A transfer of $3,000 for pre-wedding expenses. Flowers, deposits, whatever she needs, he'd said. I sent it that same afternoon. Of course I did. I was thrilled to be included. Thrilled to be invited. Funny, isn't it? How much I paid to be uninvited. I looked at the papers one last time before my trip. I'd taken them out to remind myself that I wasn't imagining it, that the distance between us wasn't just emotional, that I hadn't dreamed the neglect. It was there in black and white. They say love keeps no records. Maybe it shouldn't. But dignity does. That first night in the hotel was the longest I'd had in years. Longer than the night George died, longer than the night Sydney was born and no one thought to call. The air conditioner hummed low, and the glow of the television cast shadows on the wall, though I hadn't turned it on. I couldn't bring myself to. The silence felt more honest. I had unpacked everything, though there was no point. The dress I brought hung limply in the closet, untouched, simple. Navy blue with a bit of lace at the collar. I had chosen it because it reminded me of something my mother once wore. Modest, elegant, timeless. It was supposed to be the dress I watched my son get married in. Now it looked like a garment left behind at a thrift store.
Ze veel zat boxt beside ze beet.
I couldn't bring myself to put it back in the suitcase. It deserved more than zippers and nylon lining. It had survived generations, and I had brought it here with hope. I made a cup of tea with the small coffee maker in the corner. The kind of tea that tastes like cardboard and regret. I sat by the window, the cup warm in my hands, and watched the cars pull in and out of the parking lot below. Somewhere out there, maybe just a few miles away, my son was laughing. Probably finishing his rehearsal dinner, surrounded by people in cocktail dresses and linen shirts, drinking wine paid for by someone else. I wondered if he thought of me at all, if he felt the absence, or if he was relieved. That was the cruelest part. Not the exclusion itself, but the possibility that it hadn't even pained him to do it. I looked at my phone. No new messages. No call of explanation. No apology. Just that one 5-word dismissal from hours ago. Still there, still unread, still final. I opened a blank note on the screen. I started to type, "Dear Tyler." Then I stopped. What could I say that I hadn't already tried to show? I loved him. I raised him. I never asked for much, and yet he withdrew. Instead, I opened the photo gallery. Scrolled through old pictures. Him in kindergarten, gap-toothed, face full of mischief. Him at 12 in a Boy Scout uniform, saluting crookedly. Him holding Sydney in the hospital, pride and fear on his young face. And then fewer photos. Longer gaps. Fewer smiles aimed at me. I didn't cry. I expected to, but the tears wouldn't come. It wasn't grief I felt. It was something deeper, heavier. A kind of quiet realization that maybe this wasn't a sudden cruelty but the final confirmation of a slow departure. And then, something happened. Sometime around midnight, sitting in that stiff chair in that strange room, I felt a shift. It was small. Not loud, not brave, just a quiet thought. Maybe this was a blessing. If I hadn't come, I might have spent another year pretending things were fine. Sending money, waiting for phone calls that didn't come. Maybe this cruel, sharp moment was the clarity I needed. Because something inside me had started to whisper what George would have said if he were here. "Mary, you have a life, too." It startled me, that voice. So calm, so clear. I poured the cold tea down the drain and washed the cup. I got the extra blanket out of the closet and folded it neatly at the foot of the bed. I brushed my teeth, put on my nightgown, and smoothed the comforter with both hands, just like I did at home. And then I got into bed alone. Not because I was forgotten, but because I had remembered something. I belonged to myself. I always had. And if no one else was going to honor that, then I would. Sydney called me the next morning. I was sitting by the window again, this time with a coffee in hand, trying to work up an appetite for the complimentary breakfast I knew I wouldn't touch. The phone buzzed softly on the table, and when I saw her name, something in me softened. At least someone still thought of me first thing in the morning. "Grandma," she said, her voice tight. "I just heard.
Dad uninvited you." I closed my eyes for a moment.
"No, sweetheart, he didn't." There was a stark silence on the line, but not the kind that comes when someone doesn't know what to say. It was the kind that fills with disbelief, with anger. I knew that silence. I had lived in it for years. "I don't understand," she finally said. "He told me it was just going to be a small ceremony, just family. I assumed you were coming in early. I thought you were part of that." "I was," I said gently. In my head, I was. "Why didn't you say anything at lunch yesterday?" she asked. "Why didn't you tell me?" I took a deep breath. Because I didn't want our time together to be about him. I wanted to see you. Just you. I could hear her moving, pacing. She was like that. Even as a child, she always had to move when something was wrong. He didn't even mention it. Not once. How could he? "Because it was easier for him to lie than to look me in the eye," I said. "And because he didn't think anyone would ask questions." "Well, he was wrong," she snapped.
"I'm asking."
"I'm going to ask him right now."
"No, Sydney."
She paused.
I kult fel IT.
"No," she repeated. "This is not your job to fix," I said. "This is not your fight. It's mine. And I've already decided how to handle it." She was quiet again, but not with that hollow silence. This was listening. Understanding. "What are you going to do?" "I've already done it," I said. "The veil stays with me. The gift goes to someone who deserves it. And my money, Sydney, my name, my legacy, it won't go where I'm not welcome." "You rewrote your will." "Yes. And the trust." Her voice was careful now, gentle. "It's yours," I said. "Not because you asked, not because of blood, but because you've never treated me like an obligation." I could hear her breathing through the line. "Grandma," she whispered. "That's too much. I don't need." "I know you don't need it," I said. "That's the point. You've never made me feel like I owed you anything. That's why I'm trusting you with it. She didn't speak for a long time, and when she did, her voice was firm but thick. I'll make you proud. You already do. A knock sounded on her end. Someone calling her, probably. Her father, I suspected. I have to go, she said. But can I see you again after the wedding? I'd like that. No, she said, with purpose. I mean it. I want to stay in touch. I want to know you. Really know you. And that, after everything, was the gift I hadn't dared to hope for. After we hung up, I sat still for a long time. The coffee had gone cold again. The world outside was waking up. Somewhere, Tyler was tying his tie, checking his reflection, making jokes about late florists. And he had no idea that he had just quietly stepped his daughter out of the narrative he'd written. No rebellion, no scene. Just a quiet, clear step. And maybe that was enough. The call to the bank wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, measured, like setting down a heavy box you've carried too far for too long. I waited until late afternoon, when I knew the lines would be quieter. I checked the time difference. Ohio was 3 hours ahead. I dialed the number printed on the back of my debit card. Not the mobile app, not the website. I wanted to speak to a person. I wanted to hear it said aloud. Thank you for calling North Star Bank, the woman chirped. This is Sarah. How can I help you today? My name is Helen Foster, I said. I need to review and cancel all scheduled external transfers from my accounts. And I want to revoke a linked authorization. There was a short pause. I could hear her typing. Certainly, Mrs. Foster. I just need to verify a few details before we begin. I answered her questions without hesitation. Date of birth.
Last four of my social. The name of my childhood pet. Buster.
A Labrador, loyal to the end, unlike some. Once I was verified, her tone shifted slightly, more respectful. I see there are 3 scheduled recurring transfers currently. One to a Tyler Foster, monthly, for $900. One quarterly for $2,500, designated household support. And one annual disbursement of $5,000 scheduled for next month. I want to cancel all of them, I said. Permanently.
Yes, ma'am.
And I want to revoke any access he has to view my accounts or request changes. The woman hesitated. He is listed as a secondary contact on your online banking, with permissions to initiate but not finalize transfers. We can remove that access immediately. Do it. She typed again. Done. May I ask, just for our records, should we mark this as fraud, family restructuring, or personal change in circumstances? Call it clarity, I said. Silence. Then, softly, understood. I asked her to email me the updated confirmation, and she did within minutes. I read every line, every dollar, every severed connection. There it was. Tangible. Real. For 20 years, I had subsidized his life like a silent investor in a company that never gave me a seat on the board. Rent, bills, emergencies that became patterns. I did it because I was his mother, because I thought that was love. But it's not love if only one person shows up. It's not family when the calls only come with strings attached. And I am not an ATM. That night, I took the folder labeled Tyler from my suitcase. I had packed it instinctively, not knowing if I'd need it. Now, I opened it one last time. Each sheet felt heavier now, not for the money, but for the silence that had followed each transaction. No thank yous, no phone calls, just quiet withdrawals. I stacked the papers neatly, put them back in the folder, and slid it into the bottom of my suitcase. I would shred them when I got home. A new ritual. Not of erasure, but of release. In the quiet of the hotel room, I lay on the bed, hands folded over my stomach. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. I felt clean. The kind of clean that comes after you've finally spoken the truth out loud. Maybe Tyler would call when he noticed. Maybe he wouldn't. But for once, I wouldn't be waiting. The next morning, I went for a walk. Not because I had anywhere to be, not because anyone was expecting me, but because the air felt good on my skin and I needed to remember what it was to move without purpose, just for the sake of feeling alive. The hotel was near a small town square, the kind with benches and old trees that had survived half a dozen sidewalk renovations. I passed a bookstore with a wooden sign that creaked softly in the wind. A woman my age was arranging paperbacks in the window, humming to herself. Across the street, a little boy was tugging on his father's arm, pointing at something in a bakery window. The father bent down, nodded, laughed. They went inside together. I stood watching them for longer than I intended. Years ago, that had been Tyler and me. A cold day in Chicago, a coffee near the Riverwalk. He was 4, wanted a cinnamon roll bigger than his face. I said no. He pouted. I caved. He licked the icing off first, and we both laughed when it got stuck to his nose. I hadn't thought of that moment in years. The pang it brought surprised me not because it was painful, but because it wasn't. It was warm. A good memory, untainted. There were so many of them, scattered like pennies I'd forgotten I'd dropped. We'd had good years before college, before pride, before the world started measuring people by polish and pocketbooks. Maybe that was the hardest part. Knowing the love had been real once, that it hadn't eroded from hatred but from distance and neglect, like an untended house, until the roof caves in and no one knows how to fix it anymore. I turned down a side street lined with blooming jacarandas, their petals falling like purple confetti on the sidewalk. I picked one up, held it between my fingers. So fragile, so stubborn. I passed a bridal shop. The mannequins wore gowns heavy with pearls and illusion sleeves. Inside, a young woman in a bright green dress was adjusting the train on another, pinning the back. I looked through the glass. She wasn't my daughter-in-law, and that wasn't my veil. But for a moment, I let myself pretend. In another world, maybe I would have helped her pick it out. Maybe I would have been sitting on a chair in that very shop, hands folded in my lap, blinking back tears as she turned to the mirror. Maybe she would have reached for me. Maybe she would have said, "Thank you for raising him."
But we don't get to live in the Maibes. We live in the day after.
And on this day, I kept walking. A bench under a tree called to me, and I sat. Birds flitted in the branches above me. A little girl ran past with a helium balloon, her grandfather trailing behind. He smiled at me, the kind of smile older people share, no names needed. A quiet, "I see you." I saw him, too. The breeze picked up a little, carrying the scent of bread from the bakery. My stomach growled. Finally catching up to my freedom. I stood up, brushed off my coat, and walked back toward town. I stopped at that bakery, bought a cinnamon roll. I told the woman behind the counter, "Make sure it has too much icing." She laughed. Back at the square, I sat down again and ate it slowly, tearing off pieces, watching the world go by. No one knew me here. No one expected anything. And yet, for the first time in days, maybe years, I felt more seen than I had at any family gathering. Sometimes, dignity doesn't come with grand declarations or slamming doors or ultimatums. Sometimes it's a woman eating a cinnamon roll on a park bench, enjoying her own company, while her bank account breathes free and her heart, finally, beats without apology. The law office was quiet, tucked above a real estate agency in a 2-story building with green trim and peeling paint. No receptionist, just a brass plaque on the door, Chambers and Reed, attorneys at law. The kind of place that didn't waste money on appearances. And I liked that. And opened the door herself. She wore the same navy blazer, the same collected expression. She offered me a seat and poured water into a thick glass. I didn't need it. I wasn't here to soften anything. "I've reviewed the documents you signed last time," she said, setting a neat stack of papers in front of me. "We have removed your son as a beneficiary and added your granddaughter as the sole recipient of the living trust and the estate." I nodded. "Good. Would you like to include a letter of intent?" she asked. "Sometimes it helps to clarify decisions, in case anyone contests." "No one will," I said. "He won't fight for something he didn't know I still had." She raised an eyebrow slightly but didn't push. "All right. We've also drafted the irrevocable trust, as you requested. The terms stipulate access for education, housing, or medical expenses until the age of 25. After that, Sydney has full control." "Perfect," I said. She's responsible, but I want her to earn the rest, not expect it. And tapped the folder, then folded her hands. Would you like to include a clause preventing Tyler from contesting or attempting to access the trust?
Yes. Done.
The pen in my hand felt heavier than I remembered. Signing these papers wasn't hard.
It wasn't even sad.
It felt like writing a final chapter that had been waiting, half-finished, for years. I signed each line, my name firm and steady.
H. Foster.
Over and over. When it was done, and collected the papers and sealed them in a blue envelope. Would you like me to notify your son? She asked.
I thought about it. No, I said. He'll find out.
She slid the envelope into a drawer.
Then we're finished.
As I stood to leave, she put a hand on my arm gently. You know, she said, most people come in here and agonize over these decisions, as if they're hoping someone will stop them.
You didn't flinch.
I've been flinching for 20 years, I said.
I'm done.
Outside, the sun had shifted. The afternoon light stretched long across the sidewalk.
I stod for a moment, holding my purse, feeling strangely light.
I hadn't just changed names on a document. I had rewritten the legacy of my own story. Tyler would be fine.
He always was.
His wife had family money. They would manage the mortgage and the expenses. Maybe he would be angry, maybe he wouldn't. But I wasn't afraid of that anymore.
I hailed a taxi.
The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror.
Summe wäre special.
Back to the hotel, I said. I have a cinnamon roll waiting. He laughed. And for once, so did I. I wasn't going to write to him. That was the truth. There was a satisfaction in the silence, in letting the absence do the work. In letting unanswered questions hang in the air like smoke that never clears. But silence, I've learned, can also be cowardice. And I wasn't afraid of Tyler anymore. So that night, after the sun had sunk behind the low strip mall across the street, I sat at the small desk in my hotel room, took out the hotel stationery, cream-colored with a faint blue border, and picked up a black pen. No text, no email. Ink on paper. I started with his name. Tyler. Not Ty. Not sweetheart. Not the name I used to whisper over crib bars when he was teething. Just Tyler. The man, the son, who had made a choice, and would now hear mine. I paused, then wrote. I arrived on Thursday, as planned. I brought the veil, the gift, and the dress you'll never see. I was sitting at gate 14 with a suitcase full of history and hope, and I received your message just before baggage claim. 5 words, it's just her family. I waited. I thought maybe it was a mistake, that you would send another one to follow. I'm sorry, we'll figure it out.
Please come anyway.
But nothing came. So I made a plan of my own. I stayed in a hotel.
I walked through the town.
I watched strangers be kind to one another. I ate a cinnamon roll alone on a park bench and felt more dignity than I have in years. I thought about what it means to be a mother. I thought about what I gave you. My time, my body, my money, my stories. I remembered staying up all night with you when you had a fever, baking birthday cakes in the shape of dinosaurs, driving you to spelling bees and soccer games and piano lessons. You were never unloved. You were never unsupported. And yet, at some point, you decided I no longer fit the picture you wanted. That I was too plain, too small town, too much like where you came from and not enough like where you were going. I don't begrudge you your success. I wanted you to have everything. But I never expected that in giving you that freedom, I would lose my place in your life entirely. I wasn't angry when you sent the message. I was empty. And then, surprisingly, I was relieved. Because finally, I had permission to stop waiting. To stop sending quiet love and photos that went unreciprocated. To stop wondering what I had done wrong. It wasn't what I did. It is what you chose. You chose not to invite your mother to your wedding. Maybe not out of cruelty, but out of inconvenience. You didn't want to explain me. You didn't want to integrate me into your curated life. So, I will not be integrated. Instead, I have started something new. I have cancelled all future transfers and removed your access to my accounts. I have rewritten my will. Sydney is now the sole beneficiary of my estate. Not because I want to punish you, but because she has never pretended I don't exist. She met me at a cafe and asked what happened. She listened. She stayed. She cared. You used to be that boy. Maybe someday you'll want to find him again. If you do, I won't slam the door. But I won't stand in the doorway either, holding a tray of forgiveness for someone who hasn't asked. Your absence at your own wedding may not have looked like an empty chair, but it was mine. And now that I have filled it with myself, with my own voice, I am not giving it back.
I wish you peace. And I wish you honesty.
The kind that starts when you look in the mirror and ask, what did I choose? In love, because I never stopped. Mom. I read it twice before I folded it.
No anger, no theatrics. Just truth, heavy and clear.
I slid it into an envelope, wrote his name on the front, and placed it on the corner of the desk. Not to be mailed, not yet. But it existed now. Like a stone placed gently on a gravesite, not to mark a death, but to say, I came, I remembered, and now I can move on. The morning of the wedding dawned like any other. Sun-drenched clear, with a breeze that tugged gently at the palm trees outside my window. No fanfare, no pain.
Just morning.
I didn't have an invitation, no seat in the rows of white chairs, but I knew the time, I knew the place. Sydney had mentioned it once, not realizing what she was revealing. So I didn't put on the navy dress I'd brought for the ceremony. I put on a soft grey blouse and slacks. Comfortable, clean, suitable for sitting in a garden and watching life go on without having to be a part of it. I took a taxi. The venue was a private estate on a hill, the kind of place that photographs well. Stone paths, arched hedges, pale roses that bloomed too perfectly to be real. The gates were open, guests trickling in, all pastels and linen and laughter. I didn't go in. Across the street, there was a bench, shaded by an old jacaranda tree. I sat there, the letter in my purse, my hands folded, quiet. Not hiding. Just witnessing. A man parked a golf cart near the entrance. Two women in matching silk dresses fixed each other's hair. A young couple posed for a selfie next to the ivy-covered archway. I could hear the distant murmur of music warming up.
Stringinstruments, gentle and pleasant.
I watched them arrive, every single one of them, oblivious to the woman across the street who had paid for more than one of their champagne flutes. I saw Tyler, too. He got out of a black car, tall and elegant, laughing at something the best man said. His tuxedo fit perfectly. His hair was combed the way I used to do it when he was 5, parted on the side, smoothed with a little water. He didn't look toward the street, didn't glance back, as if the world behind him had never existed. I wasn't angry. I thought I might be. That seeing him in his final act of exclusion would break something in me. But all I felt was distance, the kind that no longer hurts. A woman in a pearl-pink dress approached him. The bride, I assumed. Her smile was brilliant, practiced. She linked her arm in his and said something I couldn't hear. He nodded. They walked toward the archway, the guests rose, and I stayed on my bench. Invisible and whole. Somewhere inside, vows were being exchanged, promises made, speeches prepared. I hoped it would be a good marriage. I hoped they would find something lasting. But I was not part of that story anymore. The ceremony took 22 minutes. I know because I counted. Birds came and went. A dog barked in the distance. Someone spilled what looked like white wine on their shoe. And then the applause came, loud and cheerful. People streamed back down the path. The music swelled, cameras clicked. Tyler posed with his in-laws, with friends, with the officiant.
Not with me. Never again with me.
I stood up then, quietly, smoothed my shirt, brushed a few petals from my lap. I didn't feel bitter. I felt untethered. There is a power in seeing a moment you were excluded from and realizing you survived it. I turned away from the estate, walked back toward town, past shops, past the cafe where Sydney and I had met, past strangers who smiled at me as if I belonged. And I did. Because sometimes family isn't the one who invites you to a wedding. It's the one who meets you for breakfast the next day, just to hear how you slept. Sydney met me the next morning. She wore no makeup, her hair was in a loose bun, and she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. But when she saw me, she smiled. Not politely, not out of guilt, but with something quieter. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. We sat outside at a small cafe near the park, the same one we'd met at before, though we didn't mention it. She ordered tea. I asked for coffee, strong. For a while, we just sat. The hum of morning life moved around us. Dishes clattered, bicycles rolled by, a passerby's dog barked at pigeons. How was it? I asked gently. She blinked. Strange. How so? It all looked beautiful. Perfect. Really. But it felt thin. I nodded, letting her find her words. No one mentioned you, she said. Not once. I kept waiting for someone to say, too bad Helen couldn't be here, or even just ask where you were. But they didn't. That doesn't surprise me. She bit her lip. I wanted to say something. I almost did during the toasts. But I didn't want to make it about me, or you, or anything. You did the right thing, I said. No, I don't think I did. I just did the easy thing. I looked at her closely. Her eyes were red-rimmed but steady. That Foster stubbornness. It had skipped her father, but it came through in her. You are not responsible for my pain, Sydney. I know, she said. But I felt it anyway. She pulled something from her pocket, a folded napkin. Inside was the locket. She placed it on the table between us, but didn't push it toward me. I brought this yesterday. I had it in my dress pocket the whole time. That's not a pocket piece. I know, she smiled. It felt right. Like I was carrying you with me. I touched the locket gently, then pushed it back toward her. It's yours, I said. Not just to keep, but to wear. To carry on. She looked down at her tea. I think Dad knows I'm upset. He kept trying to joke with me last night, but I barely answered. You don't have to choose. But I already have, she said quietly. Not sides. Truth. I know who's honest with me. I know who sees me. I felt something shift inside me. Not triumph, not victory. Just healing. Like a door that had been swollen shut for a long time finally creaking open. I wish I could promise it won't get harder, I said. But it might. The older you get, the more people will ask you to pretend things are okay that aren't okay. She nodded slowly. You're the only one who's ever said that out loud. I reached across the table and held her hand.
You don't over-anione the lengse.
She squeezed back. Neither do you. We sat until the sun grew warm on our shoulders, until the tea cooled, until the waitress came by and smiled and said, You two look alike. And for the first time in years, I believed it was a compliment. Because I wasn't just someone's forgotten mother. I was Sydney's grandmother. And that was more than enough.
I flew home on a Tuesday.
Same airline, same suitcase, but everything felt different. The air in the terminal no longer pressed against my chest like it had days before. My steps were slower, but more solid. I wasn't leaving anything behind, not really. I was taking something with me. Something I hadn't known I needed.
The end of pretending.
The flight was quiet. A few businessmen scrolled through slides. A couple with a toddler between them dozed on each other's shoulders. I read a book I didn't finish, stared out the window, ordered tomato juice just to taste something real.
The sky over Ohio was soft and deep when we landed.
Not dramatic, not cold. Just honest. The kind of gray that doesn't ask anything of you. A taxi took me home. The driver didn't talk much, and I didn't mind the silence. The streets looked exactly as I'd left them. This was a comfort, not a disappointment. When I stepped through my door, the familiar creak greeted me like an old friend. The house smelled faintly of dust and lavender cleaner. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I set my suitcase down gently and walked through each room as if seeing it anew. The kitchen with its chipped tiles, the living room where George's armchair still sat under the reading lamp, the bedroom where the photo of him and toddler Tyler was still on the nightstand. I didn't touch it, didn't turn it over. I just let it be what it was. A moment caught in time, not erased by what came after. I made tea. Not hotel tea. My tea. Chamomile and mint, with a spoonful of honey, in the mug that said World's Best Mom. A gag gift from Sydney when she was 12. I sat in my chair by the window and watched the late afternoon light fall across the porch. The daffodils were fully open now, yellow and defiant. I didn't cry. I thought maybe I would. That coming home would release the tears I hadn't allowed. But instead, I felt a calm clean, the way a room feels after you've finally pulled up the old carpet and seen the floor underneath. Later, I went to the drawer, the one that sticks on the left. I opened it, pulled out the folder labeled Tyler. I sat at the table and turned over each sheet one last time. Receipts, transfers, notes. Each a silent record of a love that had expected nothing in return, and gotten exactly that.
I got the shredder out of the hall closet.
I fed the pages through slowly, one by one. Not out of malice, but out of peace. This wasn't punishment, it was pruning. What does not grow is cut back. When I was done, I emptied the bin into a paper bag and set it by the back door to go out with the trash. It felt light, considering how much of my life had just passed through those blades. Then I opened the small linen closet and reached for the box. The veil. I laid it out on the bed. Carefully as always. Ran my fingers over the lace. I didn't cry then either. Instead, I smiled. The veil had been worn by strong women. Ruth, who raised 4 children through wartime. Me, who buried a husband and carried on. It didn't need another wedding to have value. It didn't need another girl to wear it to be important. It had already done its work. I folded it back into its cloth, tied it with the same ribbon, and put it away in the cedar chest. Maybe Sydney would want it someday. Maybe not.
I wouldn't ask.
That choice would be hers. Just as this week had finally been mine. Before bed, I opened my phone. A single message from Tyler. Hope you're okay. Ceremony went well. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not unanswered, not angry. Just unnecessary. I got into bed the same side, the same blanket folded at the foot. I turned out the light, let the quiet fill the room, and breathed. No one would rewrite the past. But I had rewritten my place in the present. And in the morning, the daffodils would still be standing. So would I. It's been 3 months since the wedding. The seasons are turning, slowly as they always do here. The trees went from bright green to that fuller, heavier shade they were just before the heat. My gardens are blooming again, lilac this time, and some stubborn tulips I thought wouldn't come back. I spend more time outside now. Not to escape the house, not to keep my hands busy. Just because the world feels gentler when I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I water the plants, watch the neighborhood kids ride their bikes too fast, bake small things no one asks for, and I rest. I rest in a way I didn't know I had forgotten. Sydney calls sometimes, stops by other times. We don't talk about the wedding, not anymore. We talk about her classes, the book she's reading, a boy she's not sure about. She brings coffee sometimes, leaves with one of my old cardigans, always says thank you, always hugs me for a beat longer than necessary. This is our rhythm now.
Not a replacement.
A beginning. Tyler hasn't called, not since that one message I never answered. And I don't expect him to. I don't need closure anymore. That's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes the answer isn't reconciliation. It's release. Releasing without bitterness. Stepping out of someone else's shadow and realizing the sun still finds you. I've been cleaning out drawers. Not because I'm preparing to leave, but because I finally want to live in a house that holds only what serves me. I gave away 4 coats, 2 vases, 3 boxes of Christmas lights. I no longer have a ladder to hang.
It feels good to unburden without grieving.
I found an old photo yesterday. Me and Tyler at the lake. He was maybe 9. I had a bandana around my hair and sunglasses too big for my face. He's holding up a fish, grinning wide, his hand in mine. I didn't cry. I just looked. He was a good boy once, and I was a good mother. No wedding can erase that. I put the photo in a drawer. Not to forget, but to stop waiting for it to come to life again. Some memories are best left quiet, like dried flowers pressed in a book. You don't have to hold them every day. It's enough to know they're there. And if you have read this far, I will tell you the truth. I am not sad. Not in the way people expect. I grieved my son long before that text message came. What I feel now is lighter, like I've stepped out of a room that was dark for years into the honest light of morning. It doesn't mean I don't love him. It means I love myself more now. That is the gift I gave myself this year. Not revenge, not retribution, but dignity, ownership, silence chosen, instead of endured. And if you, wherever you are reading this, have ever felt put aside, erased, or uninvited by the very people you built your life around, let me tell you something simple. You are still the author of your story. You do not get to have your ending written for you just because you stopped reading halfway through. Stand up.
Citol.
Shred the old accounts.
Vire the dress anivé.
Eat the cinnamon roll. Speak the truth, even if it trembles. And if they haven't saved you a seat, pull up your own chair. Or walk away entirely. But do not dare to believe you are disposable. You are not. You are the root from which you grew. And you, my dear, are allowed to grow again. On your own terms. In your own light. If this story moved you, share it. Tell someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment, say, I see you. Because I promise, someone is waiting for those words. And if you have ever sat alone at an airport with a suitcase full of love and no place to put it, know this. You are not alone. And it is never, ever too late to begin again.